Thank you for joining me today. This is Gary Zacharias. You're listening to the Apologist Bookshelf. In the last podcast, I'm thinking with Christmas coming up, it might be good to lay out some books that I really have appreciated over the years and ones that you might want to incorporate on your shelf. Do a lot of hinting or make a list of some good books you'd like or books that you'd like to give to other people. So in the last podcast, what I did was give you kind of the old standards, the ones that have been around a long time and have stood the test of time. I wanted this time to give you, again, kind of a long list, but you can email me, and I'll be glad to give you a list, and you can actually see it and share it with others. But so let me start with, I've got I got 5 books here that all have to do with artificial intelligence. That's kind of my new heavy interest, and they've just been coming out like crazy in the last few years. One is called Artificial Intelligence and the Christian. Peter Goman is the author of this one, and it's really thought-provoking. He tells about the impact AI has, and he offers some good guidance for Christians to deal with it. It's a very small book, too, very easy to read. It's only 50-some pages. One that covers it in a little more depth is Stephen Driscoll's book called Made in Our Image, and it's subtitled God, Artificial Intelligence, and You. And we know artificial intelligence is coming. I mean, it's here, and it's coming full speed toward us. And so this author asks the question is, how should Christians navigate their way through these changes? What does Christianity have to say about things that are coming? So this is an author and a pastor. So his name is Stephen Driscoll. That's a second good book. I know you'd like that one. And one that kind of got it started for me by Wallace Hindley is called Who Will Rule the Coming Gods? And his focus is artificial intelligence and what's happening as far as a spiritual crisis that's coming. And his big view, his big picture is that there are 2 worldviews that are clashing here. The Judeo-Christian worldview is clashing with the people of Silicon Valley and their worldview. And when we've kind of let our society drift away from the Judeo-Christian worldview, what's replacing it? Much of it is going to be negative and it's going to be harmful. So that's a wonderful book. I like that a lot. Here's one that's maybe one of the newest ones, and it's done by people involved in Biola's AI lab. It's called What Christians Should Know About AI, subtitled Navigating Artificial Intelligence with Biblical Wisdom. And this one is so good. It's got screenshots. It's got all sorts of good discussions here, how AI impacts business and the economy and the risks, how it challenges Christian values and human dignity. And I would just, if I can take a second, I'd like to make a plug for Biola College's, Biola University, I guess it is. It's AI Lab. It's excellent. I went there, and there are some videos to watch that you can download, all sorts of good information about basics like what is AI and what values does it maybe impinge on or clash with as far as Christianity goes. So that's excellent. Here's a 5th book called Are We All Cyborgs Now? Reclaiming Our Humanity from the Machine. And this is a big book. It'll probably scare some people off. It's over 400 pages. But people talk about it being really an important book, and it is. And what they've done is take wisdom from tech critics and theologians and even poets to help us figure out how do we live as humans, as people of the faith, in a world that's being set up for artificial intelligence. So those are my 5 books on AI. Really, really good. Okay, and by the way, when I say these are newer books to me, it doesn't mean they just came out. But I'm just saying, as far as I'm concerned, they're the last year or 2 that I've been reading them. Justin Brierley, the UK broadcaster and writer and speaker, he hosts the Unbelievable podcast, among other shows. Well, he has a book called The Surprising Rebirth of Belief in God. And what he does is he's been on the air for a long time. So he takes some of his previous interviews that he's had with new atheists. And I remember somebody once said the new atheists are like the old atheists, except they're just angrier. So the new atheists had their field day, didn't they, for a while? They got really big. They got popular. You had all these Richard Dawkins type people, Christopher Hitchens, Daniel Dennett, and they were coming on strong. Boy, they were talking about how bad any religion was, but they had a special hatred for Christianity that you could tell. But anyway, so his book is now saying, what happened to this new atheism? Is it increasing? Has it changed everybody's minds? And the answer is no. And people are considering Christianity again. They've kind of come out from under the shadow of these new atheists. So it's called The Surprising Rebirth of Belief in God. You'd like that one. How about the one by Gavin Ortland that I just read a while back called Why God Makes Sense in a World That Doesn't? And what he's trying to do, the subtitle says it pretty well, The Beauty of Christian Theism. So what he does is he takes things like the cause, right? We have a world here. Where'd this world come from? And it's plausible that you could say there must be something outside of nature that created it. Then he has a section here, why math, music, and love make more sense if there's a God. That's interesting, isn't it? We don't think about that very much. The idea that love and music and math could actually lead us to God. And even good and evil, right? The clash of good and evil. And the hope of the world. And so it's a really good book, Why God Makes Sense in a World That Doesn't. You might share that one with friends, especially ones that maybe aren't Christian. Clay Jones, who's been a terrific speaker. He's a professor of Christian apologetics. He's an author, has all sorts of things. He's had a talk show. And he put out a book that really got my attention. It's called Immortal. And it's subtitled How the Fear of Death Drives Us and What We Can Do About It. So I think that's fascinating because there's no doubt everybody fears to some extent the coming of death for everyone and how that fear of death drives human behavior. So he spends a lot of time talking about immortality projects that people come up with to try to avoid it and not think about it and kind of whistle in the dark and all sorts of projects. Really interesting. But he shows how each one of those fails, right? There are a lot of problems that come about when you try to avoid the idea of death. And then he gets into the resurrection of Jesus and how to enjoy now in this life, how to enjoy our true immortality and how we have this wonderful hope for us. And he talks about our heart's desire, glorious immortality. So right now, staying alive and then staring down death and then what will happen after death. And so what a difference in the Christian life. And you've known that if you've gone to a funeral service, for example, a memorial service. What a difference if you go to a non-Christian versus a Christian one. We just say, we'll see you later. We miss you, but we'll see you later. So there's hope, and real hope based on history and all sorts of things. So I like that book. Here's one that I just came across a while back. It's called Which God is God? And it's a lawyer. And he's looking at God and religion. So what he does, he takes religions like Hinduism, Buddhism, Taoism, Islam, Judaism, New Age, and he matches it up with Christianity and says, look, all of these have very different views of God and the hereafter. So he just goes chapter by chapter. What do these other religions say? What does Christianity say? And then he shows the differences, and he shows which one seems to be closer to reality. And so it's things like nature and spiritual truths and holy books and things like that. Prophecies, which religion has done a better job in its holy books regarding prophecy. So if you like thinking about other religions and how they approach life, I think you'd like one. Which God is God? All right, here's one by James Rochford, Evidence Unseen. And I love the subtitle, Exposing the Myth of Blind Faith, because he's onto something there. You look around and people think Christianity is just blind faith. It's whistling in the dark. It's just making a leap. And he's showing that that's not the case at all. So he says we should be learning how to defend our faith without being defensive. So he offers some research here, and he's a good, careful thinker. He's a younger person, and he takes on these current attacks against the Christian worldview. And so here's a Dr. Rosemary Avery. She's a professor at Cornell. She says, I've been searching for an apologetics text that lays out the evidence in a way I could explain it to a non-Christian. This book is it. And so I like that a lot. It's a good book. It's a fun read, too. Very, very fun, very interesting author. How about Rod Dreher? Interesting persons. He's got a book called Live Not by Lies. I'm still making my way through it. I haven't finished it yet completely, but almost done. He's a senior editor at the American Conservative. He's written The Benedict Option and some other books that are really interesting. So he says what's going on in our society today is what he calls a soft totalitarianism, and that we're heading toward basically what communism gave its people in Russia and places like that. And he said hardly any American Christians recognize what's going on, and we don't know what to do about it. And so he lays out steps for resistance, and he shares these wonderful stories of modern-day dissidents in Eastern Europe who somehow were able to preserve their faith and their integrity, even though there was a lot of tyranny at that time that they had to face. So, excellent book, Live Not by Lies. Here's one I know would scare off a lot of people because it is a monster book, 800 and some pages, Doug Groteis. This is the second edition of the book. It's called Christian Apologetics, and it's subtitled A Comprehensive Case for Biblical Faith. Well, amen to that. Comprehensive is the word. Wonderful book. One of those that would sit on your shelf. You're not going to sit down and read through it completely in one sitting or 10 or 50 sittings, but you're going to dip in and dip out. You're going to find things that you want, like things like the cosmological argument. Why do we think God could have created the universe? Things on Darwinism. He looks at intelligent design, a moral argument for God. He talks about the atonement and the incarnation, the resurrection. He gets into objections, a whole section here, objections to Christian theism. Religious pluralism. Oh, there's so many religions. How can you tell? He has a chapter on apologetics and the challenge of Islam. And then, of course, he's got to deal with, and he does a good job, the problem of evil. And so, excellent, excellent book. One of those that I know you would get a lot of good out of. Just don't let the size intimidate you. Natasha Crane, one of my favorite authors, has a book out, When Culture Hates You. And she subtitles it, Persevering for the Common Good as Christians in a Hostile Public Square. And that's where we are these days. If you keep your religion to yourself, people will tolerate that. But the minute you speak up, the minute you suggest some kind of action should be taken, then you're told to keep it quiet and keep it personal. She says, Jesus warned that we would face this kind of stuff. In John 15, Jesus says, if the world hates you, know that it has hated me before it hated you. And so we're seeing this cultural hostility increase toward Christianity. So a lot of people are kind of pulling back. They're not advocating for any kind of biblical value in the public square. But we've got to pursue the common good, right? We're here not just to wait until we die to go to heaven. We're supposed to make this world a better place. And yet we've got this culture out there that embraces real darkness. And so she's got a great idea of steps that we can take, 35 practical ideas to get started, and to understand where's this coming from, this hostility, and how do we see it around us, the social justice issues, abortion, transgenderism, and things like that. So anything by Natasha Crane is excellent. It's something we can all understand and grasp. She's sharp without being overly intellectual and confusing us. So Natasha Crane, When Culture Hates You. Okay, for a change of pace, I love history. I love archaeology. Titus Kennedy has a book called Unearthing the Bible. It is a beautiful book. You talk about a book for Christmas. This is it. It's got all sorts of wonderful pictures of finds that they've come across in the Middle East. And his idea is that, for a long time, we've heard the Bible is just a bunch of myths and it's legends that the Jewish people came up with to kind of make themselves feel better about their heritage, or it's a lot of propaganda. But Titus Kennedy, who's a professional archaeologist himself, and he's been a consultant, he's been a writer, he's been a guide for archaeological documentaries, And so he comes along and he said, if you look at the archaeological evidence, you'll be amazed at the accuracy. And so he presents 101 objects in this book that provide all sorts of evidence for the historical reliability of Scripture. And he's gathered them from museums and all sorts of stuff and taken pictures of them. It's a visual guide. So he's got things on the Ark and the Philistines. He's got some of the Baal statues of their gods, Ashtarti, the curious case of Shechem. These are the Amarna letters. And so he takes it through time into the New Testament as well. We get Cana, wedding jars. Remember Jesus filling up the jars and turning them into wine. The census of Quirinius, that's in Luke. Dead Sea Scrolls, got a picture of the great Isaiah scroll. So he tells you what it is, and he tells you how it connects to biblical history and some amazing insights that he's got there. So I think you'd like that one a great deal. All right, here's one that unfortunately is hugely important today. It's called Critical Dilemma, and it's dealing with critical theory and the social justice movement. And this is a big book. So again, let's see, it's about 500 pages. And so it's a little intimidating that way. And it may actually be too much in depth. And I caught myself kind of moving past certain parts of it. But don't judge it badly because of that. I mean, these authors are two of them, Neil Shenvi and Pat Sawyer. They've gotten into critical race theory and queer theory and how these things are just bombarding our culture, telling us about race and class and gender and identity and justice. And it's changing how people are seeing things. And so these two authors tell you the origins, how we've come up with this critical theory that's overwhelming our society, and they judge it from biblical orthodoxy. And they admit, which I think is very fair, that some of these theory ideas can provide some insights regarding race, class, and gender, but they show that how there are false assumptions that are at the heart of this critical theory. It's a threat to our churches, but it's bigger than that. It's a threat to our entire society. And so it's a challenge to us to seek true justice and have racial healing, but to oppose critical theory's errors. There's so many errors in it. I guess the only thing I would say that I'm happy about looking at our society, I think this idea of critical theory is ebbing a little bit. People are starting to come to their senses. And so I hope that's the case. But this book will give you a wonderful background and a good, solid foundation in understanding critical theory, where it came from and what the problems are with it. Well, you know by now, if you've been listening to a lot of my podcasts, I really like J. Warner Wallace. What an author. What a terrific author. Cold Case Christianity and God's Crime Scene and other really good books. Well, this one is called The Truth in True Crime. And I love his approach to this. He takes all of these things that make for a flourishing generation, for a flourishing human race, how do we thrive? Well, when we revere wisdom, when we have good friendships, when we commit to marriage, when we devote ourselves to something worthy, we have a bigger purpose than making a few bucks. When we are humble, when we find contentment and purpose in our work, when we seek justice, and on and on. So these are all the things that make humans flourish, not just for Christians, right? This is to make the entire world full of people flourish. And he shows how Christianity is the answer to these things. If we want humanity to flourish, Christianity is the best place to go to for ways to do that. So it's not just Christianity is true because you'll live after death. Okay, yeah, that's hugely vital. But what about in this world? We want what's best for people, and I think we need to explain that clearly. We want what's best for people. So when somebody challenges us and says, oh, you want to impose Christianity, we're saying, no, let's talk about what's best for people. It's not just what I like or what I think is good, but what studies have shown. And so this book is excellent. Greg Kokel, president of Stand to Reason, says it's a storehouse of wisdom. Melissa Doherty, she said, I've been waiting for J. Warner Wallace to write a book like this. Greg Laurie compliments it. Kirk Cameron compliments it. So every chapter Again, Wallace is a cold case detective, so he talks about the leads. He tells you stories of real people who have been involved in crimes, but every chapter then says, what happened? How did this go bad for this person? How can we thrive? How can we flourish as humans? Wonderful insights. In fact, I think this book is good to give to somebody who's not a Christian, who maybe not even planning on being a Christian, but it talks about insights into being human beings and making something out of our lives. And we all want to be taken seriously and to have our lives count for something. Okay, here's one more book. I got two to go. One's by Eric Metaxas. It's called Is Atheism Dead? And it is so good. Wonderful book. Des Prager compliments it, Stephen Meyer, Hugh Ross, and others. And so Metaxas flips that famous question that Time magazine asked, is God dead? And he turns it around. He says, is atheism dead? And he's fun to read, if you've listened to Metaxas at some time. But he goes after the new atheists, but he talks about ways that Christianity and theism, meaning there is a God, why these things are coming back. So he talks about things like science, right? Like the Big Bang and the fine-tuned planet and how life originated and the complexity of life, things like that. And then he talks about archaeology and how that's leading toward God, both Old Testament and New Testament archaeology. Then he gets around to truth. Atheists have a hard time dealing with something like that. Christianity begat science. He talks about the founding myth of atheism, Galileo, Copernicus, and the church. He talks about the bleakness of materialism. If that's all you believe is out there, just the material world, what does that do for your life? It is pretty grim. All right, so that's a good book. And then I'll end on this one. This is a Sean McDowell edited book called Apologetics for an Ever-Changing Culture. Again, excellent. And what he's talking about here is how you can engage confidently with non-Christians. So we're in a world that is challenging Christians, and how we can converse biblically and effectively on all sorts of issues like mental health and critical theory. There it is again. Deconstruction, gender narratives, and how to defend the faith even online. And how should we teach apologetics to the next generation? And so it's good for, as they say here, it's good for group study or individual study. But it's wonderful. It's all the people that he's gotten to write for him, different chapters. Of course, Sean does some of it himself, but Neil Shinvey is in here. Jeremiah Johnston, excellent. Let's see if I can find Jonathan Morrow, Alan Schliemann, that's Stand to Reason, Tim Muehlhoff, Craig Hazen, Alex McFarland, Brian Godawa, Natasha Crane, there she is, John Stonestreet, Josh McDowell, Brett Kunkel, Dan Kimball. So these are various viewpoints of how today we can be talking to people and not be, back in the 1950s or something, not understanding what this society is like and what they're looking for. So again, that's a wonderful book. Well, I know it went fast. And like I said, if you want to get a list of these from me, I will be happy to send them to you. And otherwise, I hope you find some of these for yourself, hint or write out a list, do something, get people to put these on their list for you, or you consider giving them to other people. All right, well, thank you so much, and I hope you're having a good day. Take care.